Hey, welcome to the Christ Revealed YouTube channel. I got a great interview coming up for you. Really great to be here with you. Enjoy this interview. So Tisha, we're obviously in a very popular place here. Where are we?
We're at Capernaum. This is the center of Jesus' ministry.
When we say the center, what does that mean?
It means that, first of all, Jesus we know was from Nazareth. And the prophet's never accepted in his own hometown. In fact, we remember he was at his famous synagogue speech, and they wanted to throw him off the cliff, the brow of a hill. And the next thing we know, he disappears in their midst and reappears right here at Capernaum, which this, scripture says, becomes his own hometown, even his own city.
And what's the significance of this site right here? They have, a bunch of structures around us.
Right here we found an ancient synagogue. We actually found the base of the synagogue from the time of Jesus. The top of the synagogue is from a later period, 3rd or 4th century. We also found what we believe to be the house of Peter.
Wow.
Which is just behind us.
So Peter's house, we're right here by the water, so obviously it would make sense they lived here because, we're right by the water. He was a fisherman. It all kind of ties together.
Peter, actually, we know from scripture that Peter was from Bethsaida, which is another one of the villages that saw most of the miracles of Jesus. Bethsaida, Chorazim, and Capernaum saw most of the miracles of Jesus. Yet, how sad is that they were all cursed for their disbelief.
Wow.
And so, we know this was a fisherman's village during the time of Jesus, but very significant in the ministry of Jesus.
So with the first century, the walls of the first century synagogue, is it presumed then that Jesus probably spoke in that synagogue?
Many times.
Yeah.
Right. If John 21, the last verse says there's not enough books in the world to contain what took place here.
Right.
In those 3 years, he just had 3 years of his ministry. Can you imagine in his own hometown how many miracles took place here and how many times he must have taught in that very synagogue?
So this is basically characterized as the hometown of Jesus, not where he grew up, but where his ministry was and where he resided.
This would have been the center of his ministry. And people ask, why this particular town? Well, there were over 200 villages here in the Galilee that he could have chosen. But I think one of the most important things for this particular town is location. You have to understand when Herod Antipas, first of all, Herod the Great died, and then his sons take control. Now, Herod Antipas got the area of Tiberias, and Herod Philip got the area of the Golan Heights. There was a customs house right here on the main trade route at Capernaum. So you would have to go through a customs house to cross into territory to territory. So we're crossing from here into the territory of Herod Philip. Now see, Herod Philip was a lot more lenient than Herod Antipas. Remember, Herod Antipas was the one that had beheaded John the Baptist.
Right.
So Jesus, first of all, would have had a lot more leniency and freedom to minister here and teach. Second of all, we just talked about the trade route. You have to understand that also Israel is like a land bridge, and this land bridge connects Asia, Africa, and Europe. And so basically anyone in biblical times that possessed this territory controlled the trade in the ancient world. So this trade route had trade and caravans coming up and down all the time. So first of all, he has the freedom to minister in the territory of Philip. And second of all, it's like a super internet. People are coming through and seeing this peripatetic or traveling rabbi, and he's teaching, and the blind are seeing, and the paralytic are rising, and the deaf are hearing, and news spreads like wildfire down that trade route, and it really is like a super internet. And then all of a sudden you have people flocking, and 5,000 people and not enough food to feed them.
So when Christians are on a pilgrimage, this is kind of a vital area for them to visit if they want to really experience the land that Jesus walked on, where he performed his miracles, where he ministered, where all these things happened.
This is it.
Yeah.
A tiny little triangle, those 3 villages saw most of the miracles, and so this is a very significant place for Christian pilgrims to come to see where it all took place. If you want to get technical, 95% of the Bible took place in an area of 150 by 50 miles. Here we're talking just a few mile triangle saw most of the miracles of Jesus.
Now there's a statue over here also for Peter about building his house upon this rock. So what's the significance of that?
Right. Well, we know in Matthew 16, Jesus gives Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And so that took place in Caesarea Philippi, also in Philip's territory, Caesarea Philippi. And so that is not at this particular location, but obviously the House of Peter was uncovered here, and that's why the statue is here.
So they built this structure over what looked like the ruins of the House of Peter. So why did they build a structure over it that way, and kind of how does this lay out? Because there's kind of the house, and there's a synagogue that's behind the house. So how would this have all laid out in the time of Christ?
Well, first of all, the house was much smaller than what we're looking at. You can see that behind us is the church that was built. It was built later, much later. This is a modern church. But it actually is over the House of Peter underneath, which is a small cubicle. And we believe that was the House of Peter due to ancient inscriptions. Now, you will see when you go down that there's an octagonal structure that goes around the House of Peter. That's from 4th century church, 4th and 5th century churches that were built around it. And when the early Byzantines built churches, when Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire in 324 AD, they built churches in octagonal shapes, and that was to venerate what was holy in the center, in this particular case, the House of Peter.
Right.
Now, next to the House of Peter, you'll see there's a big area which is called the insula, and that is an extended family dwelling. And you can see several homes, probably 15 families live there.
Wow.
But the House of Peter is just one of those cubicles, just one
Just
particular
one of the
house.
Right. I walked over. I said, "Oh, it looks like kind of a big house."
Right.
But that's actually he was just one little piece of that,
That's
and there
right.
were all these other families that were living around.
Right.
And then when we look at the ruins from the 4th century synagogue, you said, but the one below it is the foundation. Did they just build a newer synagogue on top of the old one? Is that how that worked?
They did. Now, the Jewish people always built the synagogue in the same place. It was in the focal point of the city. It was the
Right.
most important building in the city. And so if the synagogue was to be renovated or destroyed, they always built the synagogue in the same place. So in this particular case, you'll see that the base of the synagogue from the time of Jesus was actually black. That's basalt stone. Now, behind us are the Golan Heights. They're inactive volcanoes. So basalt stone is a local stone that's dried lava. And so that is what the synagogue was built of during the time of Jesus.
Right.
The synagogue on top here, you'll notice, is a beautiful white synagogue,
Yeah.
limestone. It's not a local stone. By the 3rd and 4th century, there was a mixed population of Jew and Gentile, and the Jewish population wanted to make this beautiful white synagogue in contrast to the rest of the rest of the city or village.
Right.
And that's why they built it in a different color stone.
But they put it right in the same place because that's the place where they traditionally would put a synagogue even hundreds
That's
of years
right.
later.
That's right.
They cited them that way. So is this actually where the church started?
Well, if you look at the House of Peter, first of all, there's several things that could have happened there. I mean, one, we know that Peter's mother-in-law was healed of fever. That could have happened right there in that church.
Wow.
Another thing that we know that happened here in Capernaum is that the paralytic was lowered through the roof and healed. That could have happened right there. It could have been where Jesus stayed, and it could have been the first church. So very significant. This is where he called his disciples, and yeah, it was basically the first gathering place for Jesus and the disciples.
Jesus came that he landed in Israel. So we must praise him in an African way. He came down from heaven when he landed in Israel. There was trouble. He came down to Africa. So we must praise him in an African way.
That's it for this particular interview. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to take this ongoing journey with you as we keep bringing more content. If you haven't already, you really should subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of phenomenal content coming down the road into the future that you'll want to know about. Leave a comment down here. I think people would love to hear from you, and then you can hear from them too. If you liked it, go ahead and give a like. It only takes half a second, and share this with people that you care about. The world needs more light in it right now. So thanks for being with me. Hope to connect with you again soon.